Welcome, everybody. Let me also introduce Emily, who you can see. Emily's a current social work student in her third year at NU, right? Planning to graduate next year. Yes, that's the plan. So do you all have any particular questions that you would like answered? Anything you want me to talk about sort of specifically? I can talk about social work as a career and all the different things you can do with social work. I can talk about the NU social work department in comparison to other social work options and other places you might attend. And then, of course, there's NU as a school in and of itself outside of the social work department and why you might pick NU over the other places you're looking for. So if you can give me some hint as to what you're most interested in, I can go in that direction, or I can just talk. So I'll give you guys a second to think about that.
Probably just the program in general.
Okay. Well, so we have 4 full-time faculty and typically somewhere between 75 and 80 social work majors. So we're a comparatively small program depending upon what you're comparing to. So if you were like at the University of Michigan, you might find there are like 400 undergraduate majors and your intro to social work class would have 120 students in it. If you come to some place like Niagara, then really almost all of your classes are going to have 20 people in them, give or take. You can hit like an intro to English, an intro to writing, some of those where you might get more, maybe max out at like 40. Of course, with the current pandemic, there are no classes that big at all, so, right? But within the social work department, and Emily can talk about this, you get us, the 4 faculty, and then 2 adjuncts. That's all we use. One is Richard Thomas, who's a graduate of ours, who has gotten his MSW and is an agency director. And then Dr. Clementine Laverman, who is the retired chairperson of the department. And she's trying something interesting. She is moved back to Amsterdam, where she's originally from. So she's teaching all of her courses from the Netherlands. So far, so good on doing that. The 4 faculty, there's myself, Dr. Skiba, Dr. Ward, Dr. Carter. You'll notice there's a lot of doctors. That's not typical for most social work programs, particularly ones our size. So all the faculty have an MSW, all the faculty practiced for many years before moving into academics. And then we all have PhDs. Dr. Ward is from the Boston area, although she has ties to Western New York. And I'm from Chicago, although I too have some ties to Western New York that end up with why I'm here. So other things about the faculty, my first job as a social worker was this gang diversion program on the west side of Chicago. I did that for many years and then moved into working in psychiatric hospitals and then schools. I did a lot of divorce mediation work, couples therapy, and private practice, clinical social work before I came to Niagara. Dr. Skiba also has a long practice history. He's the one of the 4 of us that maintains a clinical private practice outside of his teaching. Dr. Carter, who coordinates our field placements, has been both a medical social worker and a school social worker. And then Dr. Ward is our one macro level social worker. And if you're not familiar with the macro term, social workers think in terms of micro, mid, and macro. And the micro is what you probably think of most. It's where you do one-on-one work, maybe work with families, children. Then there's the macro work. And there's a couple of aspects to macro social work. So my classic example is domestic violence. So let's say you want to work in the domestic violence shelter, you want to work with victims of domestic violence, and you want to help them get out of their situations and get to a much more healthy place. That's great work, except who pays your salary, who runs the shelter, where does the money come from for all of these things? We're not going to charge victims of domestic violence for our help. So how do we get paid? We're very altruistic, but we also want to make a living, right? Then there's the law, the courts, police, lawyers. They all get involved in domestic violence situations. So those are the things that you look at in macro social work. So we have quite a blend of faculty with a wide range of experiences. Everybody has practice experience, and then everybody does research. So you'll find a lot of ongoing research projects. The ones I do are mostly related to poverty and to the education of undergraduates about poverty. Dr. Skiba does a lot of research into human sexuality. Dr. Ward, who runs our Ostapenko Center, she's interested in all aspects of diversity, social justice, and does a lot of research into what's called reentry. Her primary focus the last several years have been what happens to juveniles that are incarcerated, put into group homes or juvenile detention centers, and then they're there until they're 18, sometimes 21, and then what happens to them when they're released. And they're often released with no supports of any sort. So she's very interested in what happens to those people. This year she can't, but most years she will have students help her go into various detention centers and help do interviews and run focus groups and so on. So let's see what else I can say about the department, and Emily can join in. The pandemic is, of course, altering things a bit, but we have a very active department. We have a number of clubs, especially the Student Social Work Association. So they get involved in various projects. They usually assist me in a separate project that I run on homeless outreach. So required classes. All right, so are all of you except Cassidy coming in as freshmen, or would you be transferring? Because it makes a slight difference. All right, so Melissa's a transfer. Kenzie's only a junior, freshman. Okay. So we'll just assume for the moment that your freshmen are going to be freshmen, and I'll pick up for Melissa on transfer. But I think we already talked once, right, Melissa?
Hi, yeah, we did talk.
Yeah, so the names, but you have some of that information already.
Yeah.
Right, so the way I always help people organize this is a university degree, a bachelor's degree. You have to complete 40 classes total. The typical pattern is to do 10 courses a year, 5 each semester. So it takes you 8 semesters or 4 years. That's kind of the typical pattern, right? It's hard to make it go much faster. And that's because, like nursing and some other programs, social work classes are heavily sequenced. So you have to take them in a particular order. And that means that, you know, in the fall semester, you have to take classes. If you miss one of those classes, then you're not eligible to take a class during the spring, and you have to wait a year. The first class you take is with Dr. Carter. It's Intro to Social Work. Emily did that last year, so again, she could speak about it. Emily's what we call an internal transfer. She started out as a psych major and then woke up, right? Switched to social work. And that happens a lot, actually, with psych majors. But anyway, you take Intro to Social Work in your fall of your freshman year. And then in spring of your freshman year, you take Social Work 210. That's a class on diversity. In your second year, unless you're a transfer student, you spend a year with Dr. Skiba, and you take what's called the human behavior sequence. And Dr. Skiba teaches a 2-semester course on social work approaches to human behavior and human development. And it's called Human Behavior in the Social Environment, Parts 1 and 2. Social work has a particular approach, both theoretically and then to human development, built around systems theory, particularly something called ecosystems. And we look at what's known as a person and environment perspective. And so people don't grow and develop in a vacuum. They are raised in a family, in a community, in a society. So we look at the interaction between those two things, between the person and the environment. And Dr. Skiba spends an entire year with you sort of teaching that, right? If you come in as a transfer, this would be Cassidy and Melissa, you would take those classes, what we call concurrently with other courses during your 3rd year. So far, so good for everybody? Okay. Your 3rd year is when you become sort of all social work all the time. And you spend a year with me in the social work 310, 320 sequence. And that's where I teach you how to be social workers. It's called the method sequence. Emily, again, can speak to that. She's just finishing up the social work 310 class, right? And she'll explain that we do a lot of assignments. You have to do a lot of video recording of yourself addressing client case situations. You have about 10, sometimes 12 homework assignments per week in that class that lasts the whole year. You're also required, if you haven't already, to start doing some volunteer work to get a feel for what kind of social work you'd like to practice, where you'd like to work. Do you want to work in a nursing home with elderly folks, or do you want to work in a school with young children? Do you want to work in an agency? Do you want to work in a hospital? So we ask you to start doing a lot of volunteer work during that 3rd year, just to get a better feel for where you'd want to be. Also, during your 3rd year, you take what's known as the policy sequence. So in the fall, you take social work 200. That's the kind of history of social work and the social and welfare policy in the US and Canada. And then in the spring semester with me, you take something called social policy analysis. In that class, we spend about 6, sometimes 7 weeks with an overview of macroeconomics and how economic situations affect people. And then we move into various ways in which you can impact governmental policy, local, state or provincial, and then federal levels, right? And we're back to some of that macro social work. You also, during those, either your sophomore or 3rd year, junior year, you'll take at least 1 to 2 electives. This semester, Emily's in my elective on poverty in the United States. Right? And the other electives we're offering in the spring, there's one on mental health law. There's one where you do taxes for people who live in poverty. So that's a very interesting elective. What else? Death and dying. Dr. Laverman's teaching a course about death and dying if you're interested in working like in hospice. Then your senior year, you have to do what's called the field placement or field practicum. And that's 225 hours per semester, 450 hours total over the course of the year. And you are placed in an agency, possibly a school or a hospital, and you are assigned to the social work department and you will do social work. You're not there to do clerical work. You're not volunteering. You do entry-level social work under the supervision of a social worker. During that year, you have a field seminar. Dr. Skiba meets with you twice a week and the other students. You have to do a lot of case analysis and what are called process notes. We'll explain all of those sort of later. You also take social work approaches to research, as well as Dr. Ward's course on macro social work. And your spring semester, when you are looking to graduate, You still have your field placement and the seminar with Dr. Skiba, and you have to do social work 430, which is called the capstone course. And in the capstone course, you have to demonstrate by developing a portfolio of competence. So in social work, the education is built around 9 specific competencies, 9 things you have to get good at, and 31 associated skills that you have to master in order to be good at those 9 competencies. In your senior year with the portfolio, working with Dr. Skiba, you have to demonstrate your competence in all 9 areas by providing evidence. We also talk a lot about knowledge, skills, and then practical experience. So early in the program, you focus on building your knowledge base. You build up what you know about social work. We then start moving into your skill base. That's the 3rd year with me. We start looking a lot at receptive and expressive language skills. How good are you at talking? How good are you at listening? How good are you at being able to figure out how to respond to people in situations? And then you can see, starting with the volunteer work and then moving into your senior year, that's where you start to develop practical experience. You'll find most social work programs are organized in the same way I'm describing, and that's because of something called the Council on Social Work Education. In Canada, it's called the Canadian Association of Social Work Education, so CSWE or CASWE. The 2 bodies are very similar to each other, and we have what's called full reciprocity. So if you go to a Canadian school that's CASWE approved, it counts if you come to the US, and vice versa. That's important because the program at NU is accredited. That means the Council on Social Work Education, who just came last semester, comes and checks us out and makes sure we actually are doing what we're supposed to be doing it and doing it the way we're supposed to do it. That accreditation makes a big difference. So if you are looking at schools and they say, well, we don't have social work, but we have human services, or we have sort of psychology where we focus on practical experience, those programs are not accredited. Psych's a fine major, but like English, history, and a number of others, there's no accreditation. So what's required to graduate is decided by the department and by the university. There's no outside standards. If you're an education major, a nursing major, a social work major, to some extent something like accounting, then you have these outside accrediting bodies that set standards that you have to meet. For history, English, psych, soc, number of these other ones, doesn't mean they're bad in any way. There are no accrediting standards. So let's see, got some chat here. Okay.
If anyone wants to see the blank degree audit, I have it pulled up. So you can kind of take a look at that. Some of the gen eds on one side and then major courses on the other. I can share my screen if anyone wants.
So for Gabby, at NU, we do not offer a master's in social work. There are other master's degrees that are available if you want to stay at NU. We typically graduate people and send them off elsewhere. So this week, for example, I've written 15 letters, trying to help people get into Columbia, Penn, University of Michigan. A couple of our Canadian students are shooting for the University of Toronto. We have one student who's going to go to my alma mater, hopefully, which is the University of Chicago. So Chicago, Columbia, Smith, Penn, those are the top social work programs in the country. And we regularly get our graduates into those programs. We don't have a master's degree for a variety of reasons, but one would be after 4 years with me and the other faculty, that's enough. You should go meet other people, right? And other students from around the country, right? And so we really push at people to try to do their MSW elsewhere. A lot of our students, both Canadian and US, will attend the University of Buffalo, which has a very good program. It's not quite in the same level as some of the ones I was mentioning, but it's still a rock solid program. And if you need to stay local for a variety of reasons, then UB is an excellent choice. Over 90% of our students go on to get their MSW. And if you're going to be a career social worker, then you eventually want your MSW. To give maybe some sense of this, Emily has seen this before, right? So I have my bachelor's, then I did my MSW, then I did a diploma at the Institute for Psychoanalysis. And then I did my PhD. So you'll find most of the faculty in the social work department have some sort of similar kind of progression. But before I began being a full-time clinical social worker, doing lots of psychotherapy, couples, and divorce work, the BA is, you can see here, that's 4 years. That's what you're looking at now. The master's is either 1 or 2. I'll talk about that in a second. Then the Institute for Psychoanalysis, that was a little over 3 years. And then, of course, I had to finish my PhD. Right? So by the time you get all that done, I've got about 12 years of higher education. And that doesn't count some other stuff that I did, like in divorce mediation and couples therapy and so forth. It takes a while to get where you want to be, depending on what you want to do. What else would you guys like to know? I can keep talking or I can answer questions.
I plan on helping kids and youth in the LGBT community that have homophobic parents or have mental issues. Is there any career that I can go into that's in like the social work major?
Well, so we work with all kinds of people from all different sorts of backgrounds. So to have a practice that would be exclusively focused on LGBTQ, you might have to be in a larger city, even larger than Buffalo, to encounter enough people. But there are a lot of agencies and even private practices where that would be very much part of what you would do. Certainly if you're a school social worker, particularly at high school, you're going to encounter an awful lot of people who are unsure about their sexuality and their gender orientation. And so that's a very common part of practicing in schools. It can be also something that you would hit in almost any family services agency. So does that make sense, Dakota? Does that kind of give you an idea?
It does. Thank you.
You're welcome. So, and again, that's, we talk about some of those challenges in class. Dr. Skiba would talk about them. So what else would you guys like to know? Either that or I can just keep talking. I've run you out of questions already, huh? Well, we've talked quite a bit about sort of the social work department. I'll mention a couple of other things. Particularly starting in your 3rd year as a junior, you are in what's called a cohort model. That is, all of the social work majors for that year take all of their classes together. So that's a little different than you might encounter at some other schools. So you really get to know people, and our graduates stay in good touch with each other. We have a lot of good alumni, and so they're always floating around to be helpful to people. Let me think of what else I can come up with here. You guys want to talk about NU as a university? I'm assuming you're in that part where you're looking at like 10 or 12. Study abroad, yes. So if you want to study abroad, which is something I strongly encourage, you have to start thinking about it during your freshman year. Because of the sequencing of the social work classes, it's really sort of important that you go abroad during your second year, your sophomore year. It's really difficult for transfer students to study abroad, although there are summer programs and summer opportunities we could talk about, right? We have a good sized study abroad program at NU and regularly send students to Europe. That's very common for England, France, a little less common for Germany or Ireland, but we do have connections there. Some of the students who have gone a little further afield, you might spend a semester in India. There's some connections into South America and so forth, right? Most of our students, unless they're a language major, prefer to go to an English-speaking country. So that gets you Ireland, England, right? Australia, or a place where the coursework would still be in English, even though the country's primary language is not English, right? 2 years ago, we did have a student, Serafima. She was a dual Spanish and social work major. And so Serafima spent a semester in Madrid and did her social work electives in Spanish in Madrid, looking at the Spanish social service system, which is different than the way the US approaches the provision of social services. And then she spent every summer somewhere in South America, Guatemala, Colombia. So she's very, very fluent in Spanish and different dialects at this point, right? And even is pretty good at Portuguese, even though they're not quite the same language. So, but if you're interested in study abroad, that's just something, yes, we can help make that happen. And I also mentioned if you're coming in as a freshman, we can look at a dual major, right? We have several students that are doing dual majors. There's also a lot of opportunities to minor in things. So right now I have Cora and a couple of others who are pre-law minors. And Cora is planning to do a joint MSW in law degree. She's applying to a couple of different schools. And there she would spend one extra year. So it will take her roughly 4 years to become both a lawyer and a social worker jointly, right? And so if you're interested in those kind of things, I should get Katie Adams down from Rochester. Katie Adams did a joint MSW JD program after completing her bachelor's at Niagara. And then Katie runs a legal aid clinic in the Rochester area, right? And she does a lot of work with the public defender's office. And that's the kind of thing that makes social work a little different than what people imagine. It's quite wide open. You may not think of social workers as lawyers, but it's actually a fairly common blending of two professions. So let's see, Emily's been adding some stuff. Answer Melissa's question again. The standard is to take 5 classes each semester. If you're used to the courses that you would hit at like Niagara College or NTRIP, even ECC, you'll find that the workload that's asked by us is much higher than you would get. So a lot of the Niagara College students are used to taking 6, sometimes even 7 classes. And a typical high school load is also 6 classes. But here at the university level, you'll find the workload goes up. So 5 is pretty common. 4 is considered full-time, but we want to keep you on track to graduate. And you can take 6 classes at a time. But I often have students who try 6 and then they come about halfway through the semester and say they're struggling and can we get them out of one? So have we talked about advanced standing at all? Looks not, right? I don't remember talking about it. So, all right. So the typical MSW program is 2 years. right? So my undergraduate degree was in sociology and social welfare. And so when I went to get my master's, it was a 2-year program. If you graduate from a program like Niagara, an accredited BSW program, and you keep your GPA fairly high, 3.2, for some programs, at least a 3. Oh, I have a visitor. No, excuse me, 1 second. Come on, Vito. What's up?
I thought I heard someone meowing in there. I'll be honest.
I didn't know he was in here, so.
That never
You
even
didn't wanna
happened in
be in here
class all
anymore.
semester.
Where was I? Oh, yes. So if you graduate and your GPA is high enough, then the MSW program is 1 year instead of 2. And that's a big difference for everybody, right? So your cat's watching too, yes. Well, there are 2 cats in this apartment that my wife and I have, so they don't usually wander into my office, but sometimes, right? So like Emily's saying, she's not seen the cat, even though she's been with me like 43, 45 times this semester, right? So anyway, I can answer questions about the cat as well, but I don't know that that's why you're here. So, so is there a suggested minor for school social work? Not particularly. It's kind of whatever you want, right? Oh, Dakota's got 2 cats and 2 dogs, right? Oh, it's whatever you're interested in. So it's a lot of social work students minor in psychology or criminal justice, right? A good minor is sign language. That's a very common one as well. And then a foreign language. If you can learn to speak particularly Spanish, even if you can get familiar with Spanish so you have some ability to communicate, that's really helpful. So those kind of things, are very common. There's also a lot of clubs and other activities you can get involved with, right, that are not exactly minors, but there's a lot of things done, for example, by like campus ministry. There's all kinds of trips. Emily is considering and probably, I hope, going to apply. What grade would you have to have to study with the Canadian system? It's the same, Melissa, although it gets converted. So if you were to apply like to Ryerson or to Toronto, McMaster, those schools, they'll convert the same back. A 3.2 is a B plus kind of grade. So on the Canadian system, I'll mention this for those of you who are thinking from the US side. So about 30% of our students in the social work department come from Canada. And then some of the Canadians are also from other countries. They come to Canada, become Canadian citizens, and then come to us. So you get a much more of an international student body at NU than you might at a lot of other places. The Canadian system, you start passing classes when your grade is 55 or above. And then if you get about 85 or better, then you actually are getting an A, right? So it's a different system than the US system where passing starts at 65 and you don't start getting considered an A until you hit 90, 92 in some cases, right? So they would convert a 3.0 or 3.2 back into an 80 plus kind of average. So that's what you're shooting for. And then I was talking about advanced standing, right? So that is significant if you can keep your grades high enough, because instead of 6 years to the MSW, it's 5 years. And that year of not paying tuition is also a year where you're earning income. So it's quite a difference between, say, making $50,000 per year versus paying out whatever the cost of attending is, right? So we really try to encourage students to keep their GPAs high. There are minimum standards. You have to have at least a 2.5 GPA. And for Melissa and Cassidy, that's roughly That'd be a Canadian 65 to 70. In the US, it would be a 75 to 80. So you have to get at least a 2.5 both in the department and in the university. And then there are minimum grade requirements. You have to get a C or better in most social work classes, or you have to repeat them. And there are three where you have to get a C plus or better, or you have to repeat the class. So what else would you guys like to know? Well, seeing if anybody's typing. If you're looking at NU and you're comparing NU to other programs in other places, as everybody knows, I'm slightly biased, but it's very difficult to find a better social work program anywhere in the US or Canada than what we offer at NU. And I say that without any sort of worries. We have the data to back it up. We do a lot of research on the quality of our education. And so you would not do better if you were doing your undergraduate social work degree at Columbia or any number of other sort of what sound to people like more name brand or fancy or whatever, right? The university itself has tremendous faculty that you'll encounter. We have a world-class philosophy and religious studies department. You meet Brian Bennett, Dr. Bennett, who is also from the University of Chicago. That's the leading theology and religious studies school in the United States. You'll meet Dr. Why am I blocking his name? I don't know. From philosophy, Mark.
Barnwell, Dr. Barnwell?
Which one is it?
Barnwell, are you talking about? Or
Yes, Mike Barnwell. That's who I'm trying to think of. Mike, I always mention Dr. Barnwell because Dr. Barnwell has 2 PhDs from Yale. So he's an overachiever. But he's also probably the smartest person I've ever met. So, right?
It's funny too.
And he is funny, right? But you get to take classes with people like that. And that's not necessarily what would happen if you look at a larger place like the University of Buffalo. Emily's in my poverty class, and a friend of mine at Berkeley teaches a very similar course, Anya Roy. But her class typically at Berkeley has 120 students in it. Emily's class has 10. Ananya can't take any questions from any students. You have to write a question on a 3x5 card. You give it to a teaching assistant who they then go through the cards and select 1 or 2 answers for the professor to answer the next class. So it's a very different kind of environment at those larger schools, right? At NU, you genuinely will get small classes and you will get to know the faculty. Now, if you're the kind of person that likes to hide in the back of the room, that doesn't work for you at NU, right? So if you like that kind of trade-off where you like to quietly kind of just exist and not really be bothered, that won't work. If you're in my classes and you don't participate enough, I send you emails asking how come you're not participating and offering to set up an appointment so we can improve your participation skills. So you have to kind of like that much more intimate, hands-on kind of approach to things. Oh, what else? If you're going to live on campus, Emily can speak to that. So could Kyle. Kyle lived on campus when he was an undergrad. But there's a lot of stuff to do. There's a lot of different clubs. And of course, if you're into it, there's basketball and hockey games, although you can't go right now, right? So, and the sports things, if you're into it, can be quite exciting. There's a lot of fun stuff there. What else? You guys are letting me do all the talking. Anything else I can add? Is there a pride club? Yes. there is a Pride Club. Um, so NU is a Catholic school, and that sometimes worries people. So, and NU is, this is how I always describe it. I don't know if Father Marr would always agree with me, the president, but NU is as Catholic as you like it to be. If you're really interested and you're sort of devout Catholic, you can go to Mass every single day and get very involved. If you're not Catholic, then it's almost not noticeable sometimes that the university is Catholic, right? But it is a place, and Father Marr is extremely strong in this, that he wants NU to be a place that supports everyone and anyone that attends. So yeah, there is a gay pride club. There's a very active LGBT community on campus. And again, some people wonder about the Catholicism, but they're very supportive of these kind of things. Now, if you bump into one of the priests that are still on campus, they might suggest that you want to think things through, but mostly they're very supportive. So does that answer, Dakota? Does that give you a sense of, yeah. At any given moment within the social work department, without naming names or anything, we have a good percentage of LGBTQ. 50% of our faculty are African American. I haven't mentioned that. There's a lot of diversity, and we're of course very, very big on diversity in the social work department, right? For Kenzie, yes, you have to take religions. These are not, however, what you would call proselytizing religions. They're not trying to convert you. These are academic religions. So you'll meet people like Dr. Gallagher, and Dr. Gallagher teaches courses on Middle Eastern religions. So if you want to know about Islam, if you want to know about Hindu, what's the difference between Islam and Hindu religions? And many people in America don't know the difference. They assume that Hindu and Islam is the same sort of thing, and they're not. But Dr. Gallagher, also back to study abroad, she regularly takes students to Turkey, although you can't travel right now, but she'll take students to Turkey, and you'll explore sort of different aspects of the development of religion in Istanbul and so forth. Again, these are not sort of classes designed to convert anyone, right? My son, who graduated from NU, was a religious studies minor. He really got into non-Christian religions, right? So a lot of study of Buddhism, which again, you would think at NU, it's a Catholic school, but he did a couple of classes in Buddhism while he was at NU. Again, these are good world-class people. These are not folks that you're going to encounter at a lot of other schools. I don't want to sound disparaging of any place else, but and most students, freshmen, they come in and like, you have to take 3 religions and 3 philosophies, and they're like, why? And then after they take them, again, Emily can speak to this if you want, they're like, oh, that was good. That was interesting. I learned a lot, right? All kinds of stuff I didn't know. So that's on the gen ed side. Just like in high school, the same in Canada as in the US, you have general education requirements. So you got to take, in high school, like 3 English, 3 math, those kind of 3 sciences. So at all universities, you'll encounter some type of general education requirements. So at NU, you've got to take intro to English, intro to writing, 3 religion, 3 philosophies. You got to take a mix of cultural diversity, humanities, and social science classes. You have at least 1 math class that's required, right? Yeah, for transfer students, for Melissa and Cassidy, you would be required to take 1 religion and 1 philosophy. That depends on how I evaluate your transfer credits. But I believe both of you are coming from Niagara College, and both of you are in the social service worker program. So 1 religion, 1 philosophy for you guys. When you come in from NC, you have 6 gen ed classes you have to take, and the rest are all social work. So 14 social work, 6 gen ed. I'm going to see if Kyle or Emily want to talk, right?
Yeah, well, I can sit here and talk for 4 more hours. That's where my head's at. But Emily, I know you've been sitting here patiently, and I don't know if there's anything that you want to bring up from a current student perspective that you want to touch upon quickly, or if you're all set.
Sure. Just something I always think about when talking about NU in general, but part of the reason why I guess I leaned towards social work after a while was the just the aspect of service learning at NU, and the fact that it's so integrated into sort of like the projects that professors will assign, or just the type of experience they want you to have while at NU. I can safely say you can't graduate NU without doing like some service. There's no way. And it is required by some classes, which some people might, kind of, be like, oh, whatever. But if you're in the social work major, you're probably one of those people who enjoys those kinds of things and enjoys working with people, especially at a community level. So I would say that's like a really big thing at NU. I can't really speak necessarily for other schools, but that's something that definitely drew me to choose Niagara, and sort of led me to social work as well.
Are you still planning to do the summer internship, Emily?
Yeah, I wanted to apply to that. So
we're part of a consortium of 24 universities around the United States that offer a minor in poverty studies. Studying poverty, Emily's in the poverty course this semester, is not common at the undergraduate level. It's much more common at the graduate or above kind of level. And part of that consortium experience is a summer internship opportunity. So typically we send 2 to maybe 3 students every summer, and so do the other 23 schools. So typically there's about 125 students from around the country. If you're selected, you meet the first weekend in June down in Arlington, Virginia for an orientation, and you meet all of the other students from around the country. You then go off to spend 8 weeks living in the community and working with people who are living in poverty. And at the end of the 8 weeks, you come back to Washington, D.C. for a closing conference. Let's think last summer, because of the pandemic, we didn't send anyone, but the summer before that, Noah LeClaire spent the summer in Greensboro, North Carolina. And Noah, whom we should bring in to talk, had an interesting experience where he had to take public transportation to his placement, and Noah had never taken public transportation outside of, I think, a visit once to New York City. And so he had to learn bus routes and so on. And he tells how where he would get on the bus in Greensboro, it was kind of 50-50 in terms of diversity, about half white and half other people. By the time he got off the bus, he was the only white person on the bus. And then he was the only white person in the agency where he worked for the summer. So he had quite a learning experience and a great time. Noah's plan was to go into the Peace Corps, but the pandemic has shut down Peace Corps. So he was supposed to be on his way to, I think it was Ethiopia, wasn't it? No.
It was Morocco, wasn't it?
Morocco. I knew it was Northern Africa somewhere there, but now he's planning to do his MSW. Lindsay Allen, whom I think Kyle knows, she was also a SHEP summer intern. She spent the summer in Atlanta working with the Georgia Justice Project. It's connected to the Carter Institute, and they focus on trying to get people who've been wrongfully incarcerated free. And so Lindsay spent the summer doing that. And there's a range of other summer internships. So aside from SHEP and study abroad, there are other sort of things. The SHEP experience is definitely a little more selective, but not something you would encounter at most any other university. So. Oh, Emily, what's your favorite class? That just puts Emily on the spot because she has me for 2 classes, right? But you can answer honestly.
Actually, to be honest, I really enjoyed the poverty class. It was really cool. And I thought that, I guess like starting the semester, I was like, oh boy, all my classes are social work. It's going to be the same thing. But that's not true at all. I would actually say that this one felt more like an economics class at times, which was good. It was kind of like, oh, I never really looked at it that way. And I used to kind of hate economics. Personally, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to learn about this. But applying it to something important kind of gave me that new perspective, and I really enjoyed it in the way that like you look at the statistics, but at the same time you would kind of push us to answer the tough questions, like what's the best way to address this issue. So I really liked that one.
You're all welcome to take the poverty class when you enroll at NU. So.
Awesome. Sweet. I did go through and I just kind of checked on everyone's status. Now, I know Cassidy and Melissa, you're up in Canada, and we do miss you. We can't wait for the border to be open and we can see you on campus soon. But for Gabby, I know that your application's in and complete. Dakota, we did receive your application. The only thing, Dakota, we need from you is your high school transcript or your ACT or SAT test scores if you took them. If you didn't, you can let us know.
I didn't take either of them. I don't think I'm able to, and I don't know how to get my high school transcripts. I can talk to my school counselor about that though.
Yeah, perfect. You can talk directly to your school counselor, let them know, hey, I'm applying to Niagara, and they can send your transcript. It has to come from them. And then it sounds like you haven't taken the SAT. I can just move you over to test optional as well. And then Kenzie, you're a junior right now, so you can just kind of sit along for the ride and kind of just be able to tune in over the next year or so as you're moving through your junior and into your senior year. We'll be here to kind of answer some questions. So for each of you, you're all in kind of different places, but we want to make sure that we're giving you as much information as we can that ultimately helps you with your college decision. So I can't thank you enough for tuning in today and being able to hear directly from us. And a big thank you, Dr. Blair, for spending a lot of your time going through this to hear and give students some information on each of the programs. Now, some things that I want to mention that we're discussing here today is not only is this a very personalized program that we have on our campus, but your experience on Niagara is going to be very personalized over the course of your 4 years. We want to make sure that we're helping you through the admissions process, helping you along the way. We want to make sure that we're helping you through, once you're in, you're accepted, that we look at the financial aid package and admissions, and that we're making sure that we work on price and we make sure it's comfortable, we make sure it's affordable. We want to make sure that everything is working for you and giving you as much information along the way. So ultimately, it's your choice and your decision on where you want to go and what campus you want to be on. We are just thrilled that you're interested in Niagara, and we want to make sure that we're here to help you in any single way that we can as you're going through this. So if any questions pop up after this, big questions, small questions, Emily did just put her information in the chat box, and so did Dr. Blair. So feel free, you can reach right out to them. And I just, as a small little plug, because you've made it this far, this Saturday, we do have a virtual open house. So if you'd like to get some additional information just about the university as a whole, being able to kind of just understand who we are, you can tune in Saturday. It's 10 a.m. And it's virtual. So it's a similar format as what we heard here today. And then we do have some breakout sessions with the specific colleges. So the social work falls under the College of Arts and Sciences. So you'd be able to meet the dean and get some information on that as well.
Looks
So-
like we'll be seeing Gabby and Dakota this Saturday.
Great. Awesome. Awesome. So the open house for this Saturday was originally set to be in person. However, we did move that to virtual, just following guidelines and making sure that we keep our campus community safe. So if you do check your email, you can look in there to see the codes and the link to get set in for that Saturday. Oh, Kenzie, awesome. So great. I'll be there Saturday too. And I'm happy that we'll be able to kind of tune in there. But again, in admissions, we want to be here to help you out through this process. We want to make sure that we're giving you as much information as we can. So if you need anything, you just let us know. Other than that, Dr. Blair, I don't have anything else to add.
Well, if you guys have more questions, I'm open. But otherwise, I'm good to go if you all are. Both Emily and I, that's a sincere offer. Email if you have questions, if you want to talk. If you want to talk to Emily when there's not like one of her professors around to see, what she would say. Maybe that favorite class answer will change. I don't know. But that's an honest offer by Emily. And I'm happy to talk to you guys about anything, including, if you're looking at other universities and you want to sort of compare a bit, I'm comfortable doing that. NU is a great place, but it's not always the perfect place for everyone. So feel free to take advantage of that if you'd like to. All right. Is
Awesome.
everybody good?
Well, everybody enjoy the rest of your night and the rest of your remaining of your semesters or school year. And we will chat with you soon.
All right. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Have a good night.
You too.